Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. Neil Treacy here with you as we approach what's actually going to be a rare quiet weekend in season. Leinster, the only Irish side in action this Friday night against Leicester Tigers. And no women's Six Nations this week. That's on a break week as well. But still a lot of reaction to what happened last week, coming up with Bernard Jackman as usual. And Fiona Coghlan, who we've got now twice in 3 weeks. Fiona, you're going to rue the day you let us have your phone number and ruin your Easter holidays.
That's not too bad. I could be doing worse than talking about rugby on a Wednesday morning.
Exactly. Listen, guys, we'll get straight into it because we've plenty to get through. We'll start at the Aviva Stadium, where I know both of you were on Saturday. Leinster 30, Ulster 15 in the last 16 of the Heineken Champions Cup. Leinster going to be taking on the Leicester Tigers again in a repeat of last year's quarter-final. Birch, to start off with, just in general from Leinster, look, we all know it wasn't the prettiest game in the world, and conditions pretty much dictated that. It was a miserable evening in Dublin. But you got to give Leinster credit for the way they just navigated their way through all of that, and they made it a game that wasn't nearly as dramatic as it could have been.
Yeah, and I think this is, I suppose, a byproduct of what they looked at over the summer when they analysed losing to the Bulls and losing to La Rochelle, that they need to be able to have different ways to play and need to be able to, I suppose, play winter rugby or cup final rugby when it's needed, and with the conditions as they were, it really stopped both teams being able to play their normal high tempo, high ruck race type game, because just it was so hard to. It was so easy to defend because everything was much narrower. So I think Leinster basically went to their kicking game, which is very good always, to be fair to them. But it just dominated Ulster. Ulster just didn't have the length or the accuracy in their kicking. And that's down to personnel as well. It's not that Dan McFarland and his coaching staff wouldn't have, don't have a strategy. It's just literally the profile of the players that Leinster have. They've got some real weapons, and they've got variety across the backline, whereas Ulster are probably a team that are more set up to run, to be fair, and kick off nine a lot, predominantly off nine. So it just worked into Leinster's hands. Leinster were winning that territorial battle. I think they kicked for about 350 metres more than Ulster. They spent most of the game in Ulster's half, and once Leinster are there, they're very good at racking up scores, and they didn't need to get a bonus point. They just needed to win the game, and I think they'll be really pleased with how they matched up without Caelan Doris, without Gary Ringrose, without Johnny Sexton in an Irish derby. With the weather sometimes making the difference in teams less. I thought Leinster would have walked away from the game feeling that they were comfortably better, to be honest. And I think it's a masterclass in PR from McFarland, because all week we've been talking, the debates suddenly become about Leinster in the media and among the fans, and no one's looking at the other three provinces' pretty poor exits from European competition. It's all been about, is it the coaching, is it the money, is it demographics? So I think McFarland's throwaway comment has saved a lot of focus on him, Ulster, and the other provinces.
Yeah, Fiona, it seems like a lot of the talk in the last couple of days has been, how do we bring Leinster back to the rest of the pack rather than bring the rest of the pack up to Leinster?
Yeah, look, it's ridiculous conversations. No one was saying that about Munster in the 2000s, and similar story with Dublin GAA. And look at it now. Do you know what I mean? Sport is cyclical, but you have to commend Leinster what they've done. Obviously, they have the schools, feeding into their system, which ables them hugely. But then they've always had that. But now what they have is their pathways in place. They go out even further into the community and looking for the likes of Jamie Osborne, these players that are coming through. But the school system is huge for them. But that was always there. So I think we need to commend them, commend their coaches, and try and help the other provinces to get up to that level. You shouldn't be playing down. You should be all looking to play up. And I think the conversation's a bit ridiculous. Those demographics have always been there as well.
Yeah, and Fiona, I think I agree with you, but also, like, it's not as if they've gone back to back European Cups. Leinster, like, they're a brilliant team and they're unbeaten this year, and there is a gulf, but like, they've no trophy in the cabinet. And I know we all think they're highly likely to get trophies this year, but this time last year, I've certainly thought they were good enough to win a European Cup and the URC, and they didn't. So this is a conversation I think that should be happening if there's wholesale dominance, over 4 or 5 years. Whereas at the moment, I think Leinster themselves aren't even happy or satisfied with their trophy haul.
Yeah, and even I'm only going back 6 months to the week that Ulster were going to the RDS for that game in the URC, Birch, and a lot of the conversation that week was, I think we're starting to feel that Ulster are getting up towards, maybe they're not fully on Leinster's level, but there was a really, really good feeling that Ulster could have gone to the RDS and done something special that night, and it felt like they were taking the next step. Now, ultimately, they haven't, and they hit a big mid-season malaise off the back of it, but it does sort of feel like we're kind of absolutely kind of going all in on the fact that we just have one Irish province in the last 8 of the Champions Cup, and all of a sudden that means, Leinster have this unassailable dominance over the rest of the Irish provinces.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, let's be honest. Earlier on the season, after half an hour, Cian Healy in the bin, like Cian Healy sent off Ulster with a big scoreboard lead. You felt that was the moment to drive it home. I think the other provinces, they probably need to get confidence from being able to beat Leinster, during the season in the URC, to give them that little momentum to be able to beat them in a knockout game. And certainly back in my time, it's a long time ago, but with Michael Cheika, we managed to beat Munster once in Musgrave Park, and it just gave us a little bit more confidence, self-belief, and then obviously we were able to beat them at Croke Park when we were massive underdogs. And I think that's the problem at the moment, is Leinster's first string, second string have become very good at just quashing any kind of sense of rebellion or hope in the other teams through their domination. But that doesn't mean that, Roundtree, Wilkins, McFarlane, they need to keep trying to find ways of convincing their players there is a chance, and obviously then doing the work technically, tactically, recruitment, retention, to better prepare them. And it's brilliant by Leinster, because if Leinster can create that narrative in the other provinces, not among the fans or the media, but in the other provinces, that they're impossible to catch, well, then that's going to make it easier for them. And and again, the job of everyone else is to say no, they are beatable. There's a weakness there, and we're going to find it, and we're going to exploit it, as La Rochelle have done, as Saracens have done, as the Bulls have done in knockout games. I don't think there's any doubt that Leinster, over the course of the season, will win the URC league, right? But after that, it comes down to 80 minutes in the knockout stages, and that's the worry. And I think that we can't have that excuse mentality of demographics or anything like that. The 4 provinces need to focus on being better, and includes Leinster. They are doing a great job of being excellent, but I think realistically for them, they'd only be satisfied when they have significant silverware in the locker.
Yeah, and Fiona, you mentioned the Dubs earlier on there, Fiona, and it is a little bit similar as well. And I almost get the feeling in the first couple of days of this week that Leinster are kind of doing exactly what Dublin did in that situation. Like, you see Stuart Lancaster was kind of on the defensive a little bit the other day, talking about, well, we've produced these players, we haven't bought them in from anywhere else. And it was something that Dublin did very, very well in those days when they were being criticised for the resources they had, where they were almost kind of using that criticism against them as the motivation, and kind of feeling as if they were under fire over it all. And in the end, they actually came out kind of fighting even stronger off the back of it. And it is a nice little motivation for Leinster to have.
I don't think they need extra motivation in the fact that they don't have those trophies. But yeah, like, they'll have confidence in what they've done and how they've developed players and how they've developed so many internationals, homegrown talent. Like Stephen Ferris said the other night, the last homegrown international for Ulster in the forwards was Iain Henderson in 2012. So yeah, Tom O'Toole has come through, but he's come through from Australia and then back in, and there's been other players. But like, that's an issue, like, that we're not developing these players. Or you look at Munster in the front 5 back in the 2000s, that the front 5 of the pack weren't Munster players, and now they're not there. And if you look at 20s players as well coming through, like, predominantly those front 5 players are our Leinster players, you know, with the odd one, Sheehan down on coming off the bench down in Cork and stuff. But, you know, Leinster should be proud of what they've achieved and what they've done in terms of developing these players and the standard got to. And that comes down to coaching. Lancaster's done a great job since he's gone in there, marrying the two of bringing the young players in and then increasing the leadership capabilities of the players that were already there. So I don't think they need any extra motivation, but you know, they should be proud of what they've achieved in terms of development and players getting to that level.
Mm-hmm. In terms of individual players, just to pick out one from the weekend, Ryan Baird, I thought was just absolutely out of this world, and he's been hitting serious form now in the last few months. Bernard, I might put it to you that we've known for several years now that he has all this highlight reel stuff in his locker. He's got insane athleticism, incredible speed for a player of his size and bulk, but is he starting to match that with doing a lot of boring stuff very, very, very well over the last few months?
Yeah, I think he's a brilliant example of somebody that Leinster have really kind of managed well, because, as you said, you know, we could all see this amazing athleticism, but they've made him earn it. They've made him earn it. Like, he's been dropped and out of the squad for quite a long time, and that's hard to do sometimes with a player like him who has those moments of brilliance that, you know, can make highlights videos and potentially change a game. They kind of have coached him and worked with him, got those extra bits out of him that maybe wasn't naturally in his game, because and that's often the case with players who are so gifted that they can drift in and out of games and rely on those big moments. But I think what you're seeing now is, and in a blue jersey and a green jersey, is somebody who's, you know, up there with the best back rows or locks in Irish rugby at the moment in terms of form. And it's going to be so interesting. Like, you know, you'd be a brave man to say, oh, we need to make changes to that front or that back five of the pack, who obviously won us a Grand Slam. In terms of first choice players, you know, the Mannies, the Dorises, the Van der Fleers, etc. But when you see what Conan and Baird are doing, with the time they get, it's incredible level of competition. And Ryan Baird at 23, having added already what he's added to his game in terms of nuts and bolts, the work rate, plus obviously the unreal athleticism that he has, he could be one of the best ever. You know, he could be one of the best ever sixes or locks to play for Ireland. And that's a big statement, because obviously you're up against some phenomenal players, but his ceiling could be absolutely massive, and he's getting towards, you know, achieving that. He's on the right trajectory. But I think, you know, Leinster, it would have been easy to just keep letting them play, but I think that they have managed him very well to get him to the stage at 23 where he now looks, you know, potentially world class.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is, I think he showed in that game as well, he still has the opportunity to produce something a little bit kind of mad, like, you know, taking on 3 or 4 side steps in a row. He still has that kind of license to be able to do something like that. So, you know, they're getting him to do the boring stuff very, very well, but they're not taking away from any of the good stuff either. But the other question you pose in that is one I'll put to Fiona now. And is he a second row, or is he a number 6? Or ultimately, does it really matter?
I don't really think it matters. Well, I think it doesn't matter when you have other players that can play those positions as well. Do you know what I mean? As in Ireland, you know, where is he best suited for a certain game plan as well? You know, he has that athleticism for the back row, but he's doing a great job in the He's done a great job in the second row as well. I don't think it matters. I think he's a better 6. But I genuinely don't think it matters. But I think I agree with everything Bernard said. His ceiling could be huge, and the fact that he's improving all the time, and I know it's taken a bit of time, but it was measured and controlled time that it's taken to get there. I thought his first half last week was absolutely outstanding. He went a bit quieter in the second half, but that's because he was doing a lot more donkey work, which was needed at the time. But yeah, no, I really don't think it matters where he plays.
Do you have a strong opinion either way where you'd prefer to see him play, Birch?
No, I'm happy with him playing 6, to be honest, at the moment. And I think realistically, everyone being fit, he probably, for the World Cup, he may be that impact player off the bench, able to cover both. But God, I can't see it being too long before he's a staple, you know, starting at Irish team.
And then Bernard, to follow up on that, in terms of this weekend, how do you see that back row looking if, number one, if Caelan Doris is fit and available again, and number two, if Josh van der Flier is out? What way are you lining things up? Because I don't think we would, like, if Van der Flier is out, for example, I don't think necessarily we would just see Doris come in and have some sort of Doris, Conan, Baird trio in there.
Yeah,
Without a natural seven. You'd be thinking like a Scott Penny or someone.
Yeah, I'd be happy for Scott Penny to get a start in this game, to be honest. I think every time he's played, he's shown, like, he's just very unlucky. He's competing with Will Connors, Josh van der Flier in particular at the moment, but I think he's someone who has earned the trust of those Leinster coaches through his performances, and I think Leinster probably would want an out and out open side. If the conditions are a little bit better, I think that'll be important because they want to play against Leicester, even though Leicester are a very kick-focused team. Leinster will want to bring their natural game to the game, I think. So I think Penny could start. I don't know. I would be happy enough to be honest, to go with Conan and Baird again and have Doris on the bench, and that's just to bring him back in, easily, and he'd be some impact player to come on. I think it'd be hard on Baird or Conan to leave him out this weekend. And that's not saying I don't think Doris should be in the first choice team, but just I think that would be a boost for Leinster on the bench, and also a natural way back in.
Not to completely go back on what we were talking about at the start of this podcast, Fiona, but to hear Birch say keep Doris on the bench and he'd be a good impact to have. I mean, bloody hell, that's a decent luxury to have, isn't it?
But then
I don't have to tell him. I don't have to tell him he's not starting it. You know what I mean? It's easy from here.
The players who don't even make their 23 for Europe, like the likes of Rhys Ruddock, who was absolutely outstanding week in, week out, and they just have that depth. Like Will Connors was battle playing with Leinster A, and do you know what I mean? So they just have such depth, particularly in the back row. But I fully agree with Bernard on Scott Penny. Like every time I watch him play in the URC, I'm like, he's man of the match. It's hard to believe he only has 2 Champions Cup games down now. And I think he's warranted that start. I think Doris is definitely a better player than Conan and has more to his game. But Conan was absolutely brilliant last week, and he did what he had to do and more, and a deserving man of the match as well.
And then to move it on to the Leicester Tigers, Fiona, what are you expecting from them this weekend? I found it hard to get a read on them this season. It felt like they had taken a backward step maybe in the first half of the campaign. Then they lose Borthwick. They have kind of settled over the last 5-6 weeks with Richard Wigglesworth. But do you see them being able to beat Leinster this weekend? Is there a weakness in Leinster's game that you could see them going after?
Well, they're talking themselves down anyway and talking Leinster up. I haven't been hugely impressed with them at all. Even last week against Edinburgh, I know the conditions were horrific, but they weren't even doing what they normally do well, like that kick and chase game. They've obviously really talented individuals, but I just don't think they're cohesive as a team. Even, there's the likes of Pollard, Stewart, but they don't really play with, I know Pollard's a kicking 10, but they don't really play with the backs that they have. They really rely on their forwards who aren't cohesive. I think they only have 3 second rows fit, so they don't even have a squad to choose from in terms of, your fits or your playing. So I don't think Leinster have much to worry about really in terms of if they get themselves mentally right. I think they're a far superior team.
Yeah, Birch, do Leinster really need to have a big off day to give Leicester the opening?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've seen Premiership teams come to Dublin in the past and just get blown away. I think there is a gulf. I think Leicester, I agree with Fiona. I think they're not where they were on the Borthwick. They had unbelievable clarity around how they wanted to play, and even though Wigglesworth is obviously a disciple of Borthwick, I think it's just a little bit off at the moment. And I don't think they have the power up front to be able to dominate Leinster, which probably is the only chance someone has of beating them, is if they can put a real squeeze in that pack. And I think it's a good draw for Leinster, to be honest. And they'll come and they'll pitch. I think they're trying to, lull Leinster into the false sense of security, but I just don't think they have the tools to be able to really threaten them.
That's 8:00 on Friday night, Leinster against Leicester Tigers, live on RT2 and RT Player and RT Radio 1 as well. Before we move on from this game, guys, though, Ulster fought hard, always seemed like they were kind of just chasing the game really though. But in terms of the rest of the season, Fiona, is there stuff they can take out of that performance to carry them in with them into what they presume now is hopefully going to be a home quarter final in the United Rugby Championship, and have a crack at, potentially getting to a final, and who knows after that.
Yeah, like I don't think they played to the standard that they were playing at the end of last year in terms of getting the ball to their backs in general. I know the conditions weren't right for that at the weekend, but I don't think they're giving their backs quality ball to go from, and they're relying on their line out maul a huge amount, which they've got success of, and they'll continue to do that. They've got to try against Leinster off that. But yeah, like considering where they were mid-season, it's surprising that they look to be in contention of getting a home semi-final, because they had such a dip in form. So credit to them to getting back and getting a good couple of wins. I think it's 5 out of the last 6 they had before the Leinster game. So they would look to that. I'd love to see them get the ball to their backs a little bit more, because they do have really exciting backs, and it would love to see them attack off that.
And Birch, one player to mention, Jacob Stockdale. He's someone who's been in a real tough run for probably a couple of years now between injuries and form. But in the last month or 6 weeks, is it looking like bit by bit every game where, he hasn't been absolutely out of this world and, back in his 2018 or 19 form, but it does feel like we're kind of starting to see glimpses of what you'd say the old Jacob Stockdale. And I say that with a pinch of salt. He turned 27 the other day, so he's still got quite a decent career ahead of him if he can get back to those levels. But he had a couple of lovely moments at the Aviva Stadium, particularly in the first half with that up and under that led to James Hume's try. But I don't know, does it feel like we're starting to see a couple of glimpses of the old Jacob Stockdale back?
Yeah, no, I think he has. I think it's taken him a while, but I think over the last 5 or 6 games that he's played, you have seen him grow in confidence and be the threat that he is. He's probably the shining light for Ulster last weekend. I think it was a dark enough day for them individually, but I thought he certainly would have put his name back in the mind of Andy Farrell. I wonder, is there enough to his game at the moment when you see how Farrell likes his wingers to play? I know there was a brilliant, running bomb and catch, but I'm not sure how good he is at linking, at coming off his wing, and just getting over the gain line. It's a different type of game that Ulster play, and I'm sure he can play it. But I don't know if I think his natural skill set is more based around being an out-and-out finisher, whereas Lowe and Hansen are very important in other areas to Farrell's way of playing. So, but look at Jacob Stockdale at his best, and he looks like he's getting back towards his best. Is quality and has the ability to probably score tries that the other two can't score, to be fair to him. But it's going to be very interesting if he can find a way into that World Cup squad. At the moment, I'm not 100% sure he's nailed on.
And Fiona, look, even if he doesn't make it into a World Cup squad, I just said, he turned 27 the other day. In 4 years' time, there'll be another World Cup coming around where he will be hitting 31, and you're still talking about that as being a real prime age for a player. Like, he has loads of time left in his career to really get back to peak form.
Yeah, he does. To be honest, I just haven't seen it. And even when he was at peak form, I do think there's questions about him defensively and what he offers defensively. And I reiterate what Bernard said about being a busy winger. And similar to Balakoon, they're not those busy type of wingers, they're finishers. And like, I definitely don't think he's going to be back for this year. And I think he just needs to be concentrating on his form for Ulster at the moment and getting back to his best with Ulster before he even thinks about Ireland, because I just don't think it's in the horizon. Could be before I've been wrong, but I just don't see it in the horizon. And even 4 years' time, I think that's too far to look ahead. I think he just needs to look at form for Ulster at the moment.
One other player to mention as well from an Ulster point of view, he wasn't playing on Saturday, but Jordy Murphy confirmed a couple of days ago that he's going to retire at the end of the season, only turning 32 this month. 30 caps for Ireland, and I know he hasn't played in a few years, Birch, but like, he's been involved in some great days for Leinster, Ulster and Ireland as well. Like, Soldier Field in 2016. I know he had that horrendous knee injury that day, but he got one of the tries earlier on that put Ireland on the way to that victory.
He was a key man in that golden period for Leinster and Ireland under Joe Schmidt. Very highly thought of by anyone who played with him. Very respected by by his opponents. And even though in Ulster he obviously hasn't had the silverware that he got earlier on in his career, I remember speaking to some of the Ulster players about a year after he joined, and they were blown away by his professionalism, his attention to detail, and it rubbed off on a lot of them as well. So consummate pro, got a start, got lots of games for Ireland and Leinster in a period when there was a lot of good back rows around, which is testament to his ability. And his obviously body can't do what he wants anymore, and I think he's moving into the agency game. Very highly respected, and he's still going to be involved in rugby from a different side of it, I believe. So, great career. And as you said, in the statement, it's not over yet. He'll be driving Ulster to try and finish on a high and lift the trophy.
He's leaving a good career behind, Fiona, as well, and like as we said, still only he'll be 32 by the end of the season, which seems, it's youngish on the professional rugby retirement scale when it isn't being forced upon a player. But he did play a lot of rugby earlier on in his career, so probably has that wear and tear of a long career.
Yeah, look, he's making a decision on his own terms. He gets to finish on his own terms. I think that's really important for him. And he obviously hasn't had a huge amount of time at Ulster this season. And like just his importance now for them at the latter end of the season, driving the standards off the pitch, whether he gets any game time or not, driving the standards off the pitch is really important. But yeah, his best days were at Leinster and Ireland back. I was there at Soldier Field. He got obviously horribly injured, but he had a huge involvement in the team up until that point. And it's a sad loss in terms of such a young player leaving, but I am delighted that he gets to go on his own terms.
Is that something you could see happening a little bit more, Birch, in the future? Like the going on your own terms is obviously huge for a player. And as I said, having just turned 32 would seem a little bit young in terms of age. And we spoke about Stuart Hogg here last week. It's off the top of Alex Wootton, only a few weeks. He's retiring at 28. I don't know. Am I just kind of thinking of recent examples? Is there a bit of a recency bias there? But does it feel there are more players maybe going a year or two earlier than expected, just when they have their body intact? CJ Stander 2 years ago went remarkably early, as far as all of us were concerned. Is it a trend you could see happening in the future?
Absolutely, because I think it's hard to appreciate how hard it is to do what those players are doing. It's a dream, obviously, to get paid to do what you love, and there's a huge amount of benefits to it. But once your body gets to a place where every single day is incredibly difficult, you can't do what you used to do, you can't do what you want to do, that's very, very difficult to deal with. And I think players will have been very conscious during COVID, seeing what's happened in Wales, with a salary reset, seeing what's happened in Wasps and Munster. It's a very small family of professional rugby players, and they all talk, and the trauma, the doubts, the uncertainty that other rugby players have gone through. If someone, I think, his body's struggling, maybe not enjoying it, I'm not saying that any of those fellas weren't enjoying it, but if their body's struggling a little bit and they get an opportunity to jump into something that excites them, I think you will start to see players take that shot and walk away from it, because it's incredibly competitive. And people talk about Leinster, and they are the shining light, but in Ulster, Jordy Murphy's getting squeezed, by players, from all angles for game time. And if you can't do what you used to be able to do, that's a horrible, horrible place to be. And I particularly now with the financial restrictions or worries in the game, you will see players, I think, jump into something that excites them, that they feel maybe not be there for them in 2 years' time or a year's time, when maybe there's a natural end to their career. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that we're going to see more of.
Yeah, best luck to Jordy Murphy in the final games of his career over the next couple of months, and with his future endeavours in the game as well. Guys, Munster 35, Sharks 50. We were on this podcast last week, Birch, and I'll remind you now of being at the Aviva Stadium on Saturday, and the first thing you said to me, who was that Egypt that said Munster would win on the podcast last week? But
Yeah.
look, no, but
Eddie. It was Eddie.
I do know, but I do think there's a relevance to it as well, because a lot of the argument, and it wasn't just you that were saying it, but was, Munster have an ability in Europe in big games to bring themselves up to the occasion. Is there a worry that they are no longer capable of actually doing that? Of bringing themselves up those extra couple of gears simply because of the height of the game or the height of the occasion?
Yeah, and to be honest, the reason I thought they would do it is because pretty consistently they've always managed to get that extra 10% in a European game, knockout game in particular. But they didn't this weekend. I know the first half they were okay, played some nice rugby, but just to release and be so poor that third quarter, I've never seen them do that in Europe before to that extent. In a must-win game, they've messed up in group stages, put themselves in horrible positions, and then got out of it. More often than not, through some kind of miracle or outstanding performance. But yeah, it wasn't there at the weekend, and the evidence, based on what we saw against Glasgow and the second half against Scarlets, pointed towards another, heavy concession of points. But I genuinely felt, Sharks hadn't been great. Very inconsistent. I felt Munster would have relished that opportunity, backs against the wall. But I don't know. I have said it before. I think they need a new crop of leaders to replace the O'Manis and Murrays when they finish. And they've basically been putting fingers in the dike for to go to 10 years, and leading them and keeping the show on the road to a certain extent without obviously getting silverware. But it now looks like it's a complete rebuild job for Graham Roundtree, and I think if that's what it has to be, it has to be. Munster, the Munster branch, the board that advises, the IRFU need to work together to make sure that they can be competitive. I think it's worrying. There's only one Irish province in the quarterfinals. That's, we don't want to be. I don't think we want to get to that stage where Leinster are brilliant and the rest are also rans, and it's only 1 year. But the manner of which, fair enough to Ulster, they lost to Leinster, but the manner of which Connacht blew out in Benetton and Munster went out in the Sharks wouldn't fill you with confidence.
Yeah, and like you said there, it's only 1 year, but Fiona, like for example, it's this year because of how last year ended. Like if you look at how the tail end of last season went, where they ended up falling down the seeds in the United Rugby Championship, that's how you end up playing Toulouse in the pool stages of the Champions Cup this year, and those games against Toulouse are why Munster ended up being sixth in their pool rather than third and having a home quarter final. And if you look at how the URC is going this season, unless they pick up a win or two in the last couple of games, first of all, they mightn't even be in the Champions Cup next season. They have to secure that first of all. But even if they do secure it, again, they could be down the seeds in the bottom two, and potentially that would mean a trip to La Rochelle or Toulouse or to Saracens next season again in the Champions Cup, and that automatically gives their chances of getting through to a quarter final or a semi-final. It knocks it down quite low.
To be honest, I'd be concerned about the next two games over in South Africa. Obviously they're home this week, kind of recuperating, but go back down there, play the Stormers and the Sharks, and needing possibly 2 wins, depending on the other games go, to even make Europe next year has to be first and foremost, because if they don't make Europe, the knock-on effects are just going to be huge in terms of money coming in, season ticket holders, recruitment then going forward. Like, I don't even know where they are at recruitment now. I know, Bernard, you've been banging on for the last 2 years that they need a big front row player, and I don't know if they're any closer to that, or even if it's in the pipeline because they signed another centre again. So I think their focus definitely has to be making Europe first and foremost, because at the moment it's on tenterhooks whether they do.
Yeah, and Birch, in terms of, as Fiona said, with the front row, it seems it's John Ryan coming back, but the hooker is a position that we've been talking about for a couple of years now, where they need a real big body. It doesn't look like there's anything coming through there from abroad, or an NIQ option.
yeah, at the moment, my understanding is there's nothing coming in at Baird, John Ryan, and he will be a good addition to them, but you would have to feel that's a shortish term, option, and I don't think it's enough. When he was there before, it wasn't enough. I think
I'm a big fan of John Ryan, but John Ryan on the pitch last Saturday doesn't turn that
doesn't
result
change it.
around.
No, but I think you need John Ryan plus more.
Yeah.
So I think it's great, and it's obviously unfortunate that they weren't able to tie him down quick enough to, looking for him. It's a great opportunity to go play for the Chiefs. So I'm not sure what they could have done, but I think bringing him back is smart. But I think they need at least two more front rowers alongside him, to be honest. And you've got young halfbacks, you've got a decent back row, you've got decent back rows coming through. You've RG Snyman, who you'd hope, will get back to his best, and there's no reason to doubt he will. You'll have Ty Byrne, you'll have Jean Klein, you'll have Tom Ahern, you'll have Wycherley, etc. So I don't think the back five is a weakness of the forward pack, but I think that front row, when you look at where the best are, the La Rochelles, the Toulouses, the Leinsters, they pretty much have two internationals in each position, either current or very recently passed, and that's the level, and it's very difficult for Roundtree or Kiriakou, to make players who aren't international class, in a position like that where a lot of it's around your size and your power, be able to compete with them. It's just, and the Sharks front row and front five at the weekend were laden with quality internationals, and that proved to be, a big factor in the performance as well. So I do feel for the coaches if they don't get the backing this time next year. We'll be talking about recruitment, and I understand that there's financial issues, but I do believe this is the time to spend, because players have never been as cheap, and I think there is good youngsters in the Munster Academy who are going to be far better off coming into an environment where they have the tools to win, rather than learning on the job like we see, Greg McWilliams' team and lots of teams like that. And it's not the same extent, but you want to give them a fighting chance.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be talking a little bit more about them over the coming weeks as well. We do need to move on, though. We've plenty more to get through. And Connacht 41-19 defeat against Benetton. But I mean, not a great week for defence coaches in Ireland, because we'll get to the Irish women's team as well in a few minutes. But firstly, Fiona, Connacht, it's kind of hard to know about Connacht. Obviously, they've got themselves in such a good position in the URC that obviously looks like being their main goal at the moment. But it does feel like it's a missed opportunity for them to go on a decent run in a good competition.
They're just so inconsistent. Like, from one week to the next, you just don't know what you're going to get with them. And they started off the game well, 12-0 up, and then the floodgates just opened, and there was nothing they could do. And Benetton are good. Some of their attack was good, but again, defense, and a lot of time it wasn't system errors, it was missed tackles, it was just people not doing their job, and really disappointing. And some of it comes down to them not having a home draw for this, playing Newcastle with a second string team, not going out with their strongest team. But more than that, players need to stand up and take responsibility as well. And it was hugely disappointing performance. But I would imagine for Connacht supporters how frustrating it is, because sometimes they just go out and blow it out of the park. They're unbelievable, play great rugby, and then they're just porous. Their defence was just porous. And now, to be fair to them, they got themselves into a better position in the URC than they were sitting 13th or 14th at one stage. To get back up there into that top six at the moment is great for them. But I don't think they went out thinking, we're going to focus on the URC. They played a strong team that just didn't perform. Benetton married in their internationals, eight of them back in, married their internationals in back better than Bundy and Mac. They were quiet enough throughout the game and probably didn't give Connacht what they would have hoped from them.
Well, Birch, the biggest question really for Connacht about it all is, do you have confidence they'll be able to just park that by the time they get back into URC for those final two games in whatever 10 days time?
Yeah, I fancy them to beat Cardiff, a couple of weeks ago. Then I saw Cardiff actually pulled a great performance out to beat Sale Sharks at the weekend. There was a lot of emotion that they lost their benefactor Peter Thomas, and again, Cardiff aren't a team that you would say, they have the consistency that Connacht don't have. but that's a must-win game for them now. It's a must-win game. I think they win that. It puts the pressure on Munster and other teams there. Glasgow away, you would think Glasgow put 70 on Dragons. Obviously, very impressive in Munster. Glasgow, I would feel, its attacking game will score a lot of points against Connacht, based on how they're defending. So it's going to be tight for them. And it's just frustrating. I totally agree with Fiona. They messed up in Newcastle. Newcastle had nothing to play for. They would have had a home, I think, run all the way to the final, and obviously a final in Dublin. It could have been huge for them, and that was always going to make it tough for them in this competition. Because I think the reality is, it's quite easy to get to the knockout stages of the Challenge Cup, but when you get to the quarterfinal, semi-final, some of the bigger teams start to show real interest in it, and not being at home for Connacht was always going to be difficult. So it's really important now, finish properly for Andy Friend. There's some players leaving, that they solidify that top 8 and ideal scenario, get that Champions Cup rugby that they didn't have this year, and with a new stadium in the planning, I think that'd be massive for them. And also in terms of a retention play as well, the new player, the Bundy Keys, the Keane Prendergast, etc. They want to be playing Champions Cup rugby, not Challenge Cup rugby.
Yeah, and they've 2 games to make it happen. We'll find out what happens with them in a couple of weeks' time. We'll finish up, guys, on the Women's Six Nations. Fiona, Ireland 53-3 defeat against France at Musgrave Park. Kind of strange where ultimately it's a 50-point defeat, but it was a better performance than it was against Wales. This one was probably down to a lot of individual errors and kind of lapses in concentration rather than just being bullied in the opening 40 minutes.
It's a bit patronising to say that it's a performance, but it was, in terms of there was a bit more fight in the players. It's hard to say how, if their scrum improved. There was 2 scrums, 8 on 8, and then France obviously got red carded. But in those first 2 scrums, they seem to have sorted. I don't know whether that's a selection thing, which I think they selected the more experienced props, which I think that was a good thing. But when it comes down to it, Ireland had lots of ball. They looked to put together some good attacking phases, could never get over the try line. But 43 missed tackles, that's just scandalous. And again, a lot of them were just individual errors. And from a young enough team, they are very young. You look at that back line, you have Dan O'Brien, who's 19, Aoife Dalton, 19, 20, and young, but then with not a lot of senior experience either. Dana had 1 game with Tullow seniors last year before she was thrust into the international stage, and she'll learn on the job. She had 2 kicks blocked down, 1 led to a try. She'll learn from that, but it's the most ruthless place to learn is at international level. And I was saying to some of the girls, I've been there before with some of these scorelines and defeats, but it was never so public. And now you're in the public eye, you're on TV, you've got column inches in papers, and it is very public, and that's going to hurt a lot more. Because everyone's talking about it now, but that's what they want as well. They want the exposure, they want to try and grow the game, but they have to start performing, and they need to improve very, very quickly. Italy up in 2 weeks, they really need to improve their defence, and that's what I would focus on for the next 2 weeks is their defence.
Yeah, and Birch, that's the interesting thing, is Fiona was saying that it's so public now, the defeats and the heavy defeats, and I think it's pretty obvious, there's a lot of goodwill out there towards the players and the team. And a 5,000 crowd in Musgrave Park was pretty decent at the weekend as well. And, they're quite a well-followed team. It's going to be interesting to see what happens if they are still going through this difficult period in 12 months' time, and how that affects both the players and both affects the mood around the squad as well, where we see it in the tournament as a whole, where England, anywhere England are going now, they're drawing enormous crowds because of how well they're doing. But even for a tournament as a whole, if you have England completely dominating, or maybe just England and France dominating, it's quite exposed now that the Women's Six Nations is out in its own window.
Yeah, and I think Wales have sold out Cardiff Arms for the clash against England, so that's really positive. I'm really interested to see if Wales actually are have they closed the gap. I know they were very impressive against Ireland, but if Wales close the gap, and I know it's a little bit different because their players can play in the English competition, but I think that would give hope to Ireland, Scotland, Italy, because Wales were 2 years ago in a horrendous place. We beat them, was it 48-0 or something, Fiona? Yeah, so
That was only 2 years ago.
Yeah, so that would give us hope, you know. Now, obviously, they've got different competition structure on their doorstep, and I think that is important. But yeah, I just hope there is a lot of support for this Irish team, and I suppose the challenge for them now, and when you become professional and when you have more training time and all that stuff, is just to show improvement, you know, weekly. Not look, I think anyone who understands the challenge they have in terms of the youth, where they're coming from, understands it's not going to be overnight. But you just like them to, you know, to show that they're getting better each week. And I think France, to be fair, was an improvement on Wales. It needed to be. But Italy now is a key game for them. And it comes very quick. I know they have a week off this week, but it's hard to get significantly better in 2 weeks. But unfortunately, that's the nature of elite sport, and that's the competition they're in, and yeah, I hope they can continue to stick together, not get paranoid or not get, I suppose, upset by the criticism, and just show improvement on the pitch, and it'll turn quickly. You know, at the moment it's quite negative. I think there's a lot of people just sympathy. I think actually, you know, I think the majority of people just, you know, want them to do better, and don't maybe understand how hard it is to put those performances in quickly.
Is one of the big issues or lessons from the opening couple of weeks, Fiona, that the game preparation they've had leading up to the tournament just needs to be better in terms of the quality of games. These players are playing week to week here at home. Obviously, you've the players who are over in the Premier 15s in England, and they're getting a good level. But is it showing up really that the All Ireland League and the Interprovincial Championship isn't really up to scratch in preparing teams for the cut and thrust of a Six Nations Championship or Test rugby?
To be honest, I was a bit disappointed with our Premiership players that came back that didn't front up in that first game. I would have expected more of them because they are at that higher level week in, week out. But yeah, look, the Interpros, from when I was playing, I didn't see its value. I didn't see its worth. They're coming together for 3 games. There's no succession planning year on year. There's no kind of pathway of players. There's no one tracking those players. And the AIL then, well, sometimes is a step up over Interpros, to be honest with you. Some of the games are of a higher quality. I thought the AIL final, Blackrock Railway, was better than some of the Interpro games. And then they went to that Celtic Cup challenge, which probably deluded Ireland where they were. They won that. They beat Wales Development and the Scottish Thistle twice, but it probably deluded Ireland that they thought that they were better than they were, when very few of the starting Welsh or Scottish players played consistently in that. So yeah, there has to be a huge amount of work about where the IRFU are going next. Are they focusing on the AIL or the Interpros as that pathway of development? And, you know, look, in fairness to them, they're putting money in now. They've put 2 strength conditioner and a skills coach in each of the provinces to ID these younger players and get them into a higher standard. But they need to be playing games, and higher level games week in, week out, in order to improve them, and that they're learning at a higher level quicker. So it's going to be interesting the next year, kind of what path that takes. But, you know, to start this, I was saying, oh, we need to make top 3 to make the WXV. Now I'm like, we just have to avoid the wooden spoon, so we're not in tier 3, that we at least get into tier 2. But yeah, there is a lot of money going in, and there's a lot of pathways being put in place, but it's going to take time to see kind of them come through. It could take 3 years, to be on 3-4 years, to be honest with you.
And Fiona, that's the long term. In the short term, and I'm talking very, very, very short term, I'm talking next week. You say must win, it's must win.
Yeah, look, Italy have produced some good performances. You know, they were good against France. They got absolutely pummeled against England. They do have a lot more experience in their squad, and they did have a lot of players at that World Cup together for 2 months. But sometimes they're the master of their own downfall. They don't have an out-and-out kicker to get them out of trouble in their own 22, and they like to overplay it. A quick start is really important for Ireland, but as I said, defence, like making those tackles, ensuring their systems are in place, making those tackles, I think that's going to be huge for them.
Birch?
Yeah, obviously Fiona knows more about me. I think it is really important that they're competitive. I would have thought Scotland was the wooden spoon decider. But you know, if we can beat Italy before that, that'd be great.
All right. Well, I've taken up enough of your time. Are you both at the Aviva Stadium on Friday evening?
Yeah.
Yeah, look forward to it. It's gonna
Very
be
good.
dry, or else I'm bringing a brolly.
Yeah, I will. I will see. Oh, you'll be pitch side then, will you?
Well, I'm pitch side, but yeah, I know hair dryer, so I need to keep it
Yeah,
dry.
I pity those poor souls who forked out their tickets in the front row, and you're standing there with your umbrella. But look, that's a Friday night, 8:00 kickoff on RT2 and RT Player, and live commentary on the radio as well, RTÉ Radio 1. But for now, Bernard and Fiona, thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers.
Thanks.